Kia ora koutou and malo lele. Welcome to another Music Industry Hui. I am Teresa Patterson, Chair of the Music Managers Forum, and this Hui is around financial advice, especially when it comes to the various grants that's available to us at this time. Topics we aim to cover in this seminar are things like whether or not you're eligible for various government grants, what tax implications any grants or other income may have, the relevance of GST, the best ways to account for this variety of emergency funding in your accounting practices, and so on. Our special guest today to help clarify all of this is Jeni Rowney, who is the Director at Entertainment Accounting. Welcome, Jeni.
Hi.
Before I start, I'd like to thank the New Zealand Music Commission, NZ On Air, Recorded Music New Zealand, APRA AMCOS New Zealand, and the MMF for helping us make these online seminars possible. Also, if any of you have questions, please just ask them via the Facebook link or the YouTube stream, and I'll ask Jeni these questions as we go. So Jeni, over to you. Let's start with the government COVID-19 wage subsidy. Hopefully everyone here who are watching this has applied for it, but just in case they haven't, who are able to apply?
So anybody, I think you have to be a New Zealand tax resident and working in New Zealand, and have been earning at least the minimum wage for the previous 12 months. So it's not going to help people that were struggling before that. It's not going to help people that shouldn't have got it anyway, but it's going to help people that have genuinely lost income with no concerts, with no events being held and things like that. So where your income is completely gone, those are the people that it's trying to help.
So like one of the terms that they have used is sole traders. How do you classify a sole trader in our industry?
So that's anybody that basically works for themselves. So you're not an employee of a company, or it's when you say the lighting crew, or you're a musician that goes and does gigs or things like that. When you work for yourself as a sole trader.
Great. And obviously, though, you would need to have been paying tax in this time. So it's not going to account for musicians or crew that have been doing cash jobs or get paid under the table?
No, unfortunately not. You do need a history of paying tax to qualify for the subsidy.
And what about if you're like, you have a job, but you are a musician part-time, say maybe you play in a covers band that do weddings, or, down at the pub in the weekends. Are those type of musicians covered as well?
Definitely, if they have been returning income from those income streams. So you can have been working full-time in an office job or in a cafe, or however you've been filling in your day, and then if you're doing gigs at the pub and weekends, or you're doing weddings or things like that, then your income from those streams has gone effectively. So what you can do is you can apply for the subsidy for those income streams if you have been returning that income in your tax return in previous years. But if you have been working, say, less than 20 hours per week in those jobs, then you still can apply for the part-time subsidy. So there's two levels of the subsidy. There's the full-time subsidy, which is 20 or more hours per week, or the part-time subsidy, which is less than 20 hours per week.
Oh, that's great. And I can say from someone who has applied for that subsidy and received it, it's a super simple process. It's just an online form. It's practically a tick box, and it does come within 5 days. But something that I was really unclear about once I'd received the subsidy was the tax implications around it. Like at the time that I applied, I wasn't too sure if it included GST or excluded GST, and then how I had to account for it in my, like in my accounts, in my banking, etc. So could you walk me through that?
So there's probably 2 or 3 scenarios that will have different tax consequences for each scenario. If you're a sole trader, like we talked about before, you work for yourself, you decide your own hours, you own your own equipment, things like that, then the subsidy will be taxable income to you straight away. There's no GST on the subsidy. So if you're GST registered, of course not everyone is GST registered. If you were GST registered, then the income is GST exempt. So there's a difference between having no GST and zero rated GST.
Oh,
So
okay.
so zero rated is for overseas income, and it's different from this subsidy. So this subsidy is exempt. So it keeps out of your GST return completely, but it is taxable at the end of the year. So if you applied and received the subsidy prior to 31 March 2020, then it will be taxable income for your March 2020 tax return. If you received the subsidy in April, then it will be included in your March 2021 tax return.
Okay, great. Well, I immediately know that I have coded it wrong. So thank you for that. And so what people should do when they receive the money is they should actually put aside the tax, like say put aside 20% or something?
So this is a tricky one, because if you know that you're actually not going to make a profit this year, then you don't need to put aside any tax, because you're not going to have any tax payable. If you know that you're going to make some profit, then yes, you do need to put aside some tax. But keep in mind that your taxable income will be probably a lot lower than previous years. So, and your expenses may not be that much reduced. So you're still going to have fixed costs that may not reduce your income that much. So the profit might be quite low.
And so, obviously we've talked about sole traders, and then there are people like myself that run your finances through a company, through a limited liability company. How is it different for in that scenario?
Yep. So for companies, the subsidy income still doesn't include GST. It's still exempt income, which doesn't go into your tax return. The subsidy income should be classified as non-assessable income. So this means that it's not included in the company tax return. It's a tax adjustment that your accountant will do at the end of the year, but also from that, when you pay employees. So for example, like yourself, if you pay yourself a salary from your company, then the entire subsidy amount, it was $7,029.60. So that will be taxable income to you as the shareholder employee. So you've paid the subsidy into the company pays the director or shareholder or employees, and that amount of the subsidy paid out is non-deductible. So that's probably a bit technical
Yes.
in terms of tax. And so it will be something that your accountant will take care of at the end of the year when they do your tax return. So when you are paying, say for example, if you had 1 or 2 employees that you were paying from your business as well as yourself, then you would take any tax or KiwiSaver or child support or anything like that they're paying, that would come off the wages as well. So so make deductions as normal, and pay them what they would normally get paid.
Okay, great. I've got a question here. Even though I received the lump sum payment in March, can I spread the income into the 2021 year as it's income to cover 12 weeks from March to May?
So if it's paid to a company and then you're paying yourself out of your company from the wage subsidy, then yes, you can. So if you've set yourself up an automatic payment But it's really not going to, it's only going to be taxable at the individual level. So once it keeps out of the company tax return, it should only be taxable to the individual. And so if you're paying yourself from the company, it will be over 12 weeks of $585, then most of it will be taxable in the 2021 year.
Okay, great. And then I've got a question back I think to the zero rated tax that you brought up. How does this apply to royalties from overseas or royalties
So
from New
royalties
Zealand?
received from overseas, they are zero rated income.
Right, and that's how you'd code it.
Yeah.
Or royalties earned in New Zealand. That would not be zero rated though, royalties earned in New Zealand. That's right.
No.
Okay, cool. I think that's really everything on the government wage subsidy. So we can move on to Creative New Zealand Emergency Relief Grant. That was more details of that was announced on Tuesday, and applications are now open.
Yep.
And that's an emergency, part of that is an emergency relief grant, which is done in partnership with the WINZ COVID-19 wage subsidy, which is a further contribution to your loss of income between 1st of March and 30 June. Can you talk more about that, Jeni?
So, like you mentioned, the Creative NZ Emergency Relief Grant, you have to have already applied for the wage subsidy to be eligible for that. So it's a top up essentially. Now the amount that it is $4,220.40 plus GST. So if you're GST registered, then it will go into your GST return and you will have to pay the GST on that.
So you have to add the GST onto the amount that you're applying, or it's included in the amount you're applying for?
I have not seen the applications, so I'm not sure if you have to let them know that you're GST registered and then they pay the GST on top of that.
Okay.
What I would expect for that to happen.
But you should treat it the same. Should you treat it the same as the WINZ grant? So it's zero rated, not zero rated, it's tax exempt?
No, so grants are taxable income.
Right, okay.
Say for example, if you're applying as an individual, then it will be grants income, which is taxable. But say for example, if you had applied for the wage subsidy as an individual, that would also be taxable to you as well.
All right, yes, sorry, yeah, I was thinking GST, yeah.
Yeah, so but if you're applying in a company, then you would have, it would be income to the company, and then if you paid it out to the employees or to yourself as a shareholder employee, then that would be a deductible expense. So it's a flow through of money, and it should all end up being taxable to the individual.
I have a question here. Can the grant cover an average loss over a full financial year, i.e. if tours are not going to happen in the future? Otherwise, how do we get support for this future loss of income due to touring restrictions? I can answer part of that in the fact that both of these grants, the wage subsidy and the CNZ Emergency Relief Grant, are fixed amounts, aren't they?
Correct.
So it's unfortunately not based on any kind of income you may have lost. It's just a fixed amount. It's like 7,000, just over 7,000 from the government, and 4,220.40 from CNZ.
Correct, but keep in mind that these are intended to cover for the next 12 weeks. So I guess until the end of June. I think and we don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 months, or even what's going to happen in the next 6 months. So I wouldn't be surprised if the government announces further relief if this carries on like this, if there's further restrictions on gatherings and events. I think that there might be more to come.
Because there's another question here saying, do you have any advice for musicians who have lost predicted income from cancelled overseas tours? Is there any funding scheme that could assist? So you would include overseas income from overseas tours part of your annual income, wouldn't you?
Correct. Yeah.
So the advice would be just to apply for both of these funding opportunities?
Yeah. You should apply. I mean, you've got nothing to lose from applying. The most that can happen is that you'll get it, and the worst that will happen is that you don't. So you can only apply and see. But I'd suggest that you only apply if you're genuinely eligible to apply, so that you're based in New Zealand, you're working in New Zealand. If you're overseas for most of it and not a New Zealand tax resident, then you risk getting the grant approved and receiving it, but then having to pay it back. So it's only the people that genuinely are eligible for it that should be applying.
And just on the Creative New Zealand grant as well, what I did is I just printed off the term arts practitioner that's on their website, just for clarification around who can apply. I'll just read it verbatim. The term encompasses a wider group than the term artists. It includes people involved in organising the project and can include producers, stage managers, technicians, publishers, editors, translators, curators, agents and dealers, as well as the community-based practitioners. The term includes those people who may not necessarily classify themselves as artists, but who may be necessary to creating, presenting, or distributing an artwork. So I thought that does really open it up to so many people within our industry, so that music managers can apply, crew can apply, agents potentially could apply, publicists could apply. So and that's a great help. To get another $4,220 would be a great help.
Definitely. Yeah, that's my understanding as well. And I think it was designed to be very accessible to a broad range of people, because obviously in the entertainment and arts areas, no one can be put in a box. You know, you can't, and a lot of times people are a lot of different things. So I think it's good that it's quite a wide range of people that are eligible.
Yes, absolutely. And another grant source that's going to be opening on Monday, the grants from MusicHelpsLive. You hopefully have seen all of the fundraising that has been going on around that. And on Monday at 8:30, applications are going to be opening for a direct grant of $500 per person. And all you really need to do is to be a New Zealand citizen, currently living in New Zealand, be able to provide the names and contact details of 2 referees who can verify that the applicant has paid work in the music industry, and that you've got music-related loss of income as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. And the good thing about this is that, unlike the CNZ one, you don't have to have had to apply for the government assistance. So that is just open to anyone, which is great. In fact, they've said on the website that it's open to roadies, riggers, technicians, crew, performers, songwriters, managers, and anyone who has lost income from their work in the production or performance of live and recorded music in Aotearoa. But again, like if you apply and you get this $500, what are the tax implications around that, Jeni?
So from what I could see, it may or may not include GST, depending if you're GST registered. And like the Creative NZ grant, it is grant income. So it is taxable income to the person receiving it. So yeah, code it as you would normally, if you use Xero or MYOB, then code it as you would normally code other grants that you receive during the year or apply for.
Great. And again, put aside the tax.
Yeah, I mean, the tax probably won't matter on $500, but, and like I say, if you're going to be making a very, very small profit for the year, then your tax bill will be very, very small. So if you put it aside, then you've got savings.
Absolutely. I've got another question. Hi, and thanks for clarifying all of this. As a performing musician and independent music teacher with a variable number of monthly work hours, I applied to the WINZ subsidy and received it on a part-time basis. After receiving this, I read on the Aotearoa Arts and Events page on Facebook during the crisis that musicians should apply for the full-time subsidy. Is it possible to apply for the full-time CNZ grant, even though my WINZ application was received on a part-time basis? And also, maybe in addition to that, should this person go back and apply for the full-time WINZ grant? Can they do that?
It's possible. I don't think you can reapply. I think if you tried to apply again, then there'd be errors in the system. I think they've got a lot of controls around who's, so you don't double dip, basically. But it might be worth a phone call to them. I think it's the Ministry of Social Development paying them, and just saying, I applied for it part-time, but I think I'm actually eligible for the full-time rate, and see if they'll top it up. I think that's probably the best way to go, rather than apply again. In terms of the Creative NZ Emergency Relief Grant, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to apply for just the full-time rate, because there is no part-time rate. I couldn't see from.
Oh, you know, there is.
All right.
There is for the Creative New Zealand grant, and also one of the things that you have to provide is confirmation from WINZ about your wage subsidy, so they would see that it's
right.
part-time.
Right. Okay.
But yeah,
so
good advice to go back and call first of all to see if you can get the full-time as opposed to part-time, and then take it from there.
So on that basis, perhaps you want to wait to see if you would get the full-time amount from the Ministry of Social Development, and then apply for the Creative NZ grant.
Another question here: if individual contractors artists have become unemployed due to COVID-19, will be applying for the unemployment benefit be a problem along with applying for grants?
If you apply for the grant, then it's my understanding that you're technically earning income for the next 12 weeks. So perhaps you would like to revisit the applying for the unemployment benefit until the 12 weeks is completed from the wage subsidy. There might be another wage subsidy released within the next 12 weeks anyway, which would cover ongoing for a little while. But I don't think you'd be able to get both.
Another question here. Hi, I earn almost everything on cruise ships overseas or cancelled because of COVID-19. I pay NZ taxes every year on those earnings. Am I eligible for a full-time subsidy?
I think so. I think you would be. Yeah.
And actually for all three. WINZ, Creative New Zealand and Music Helps.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't see why not.
I had read somewhere that there was going to be some relief on paying taxes for self-employed people, and also maybe prov tax payments. Is this true?
So I think it'd be, it's technically true. So if the important thing to do is to make sure that you're still filing all of your tax returns on time. So all of your GST returns, all of your PAYE returns, they still need to be filed with IRD on time. And then IRD are looking at, if you can't afford the payment, so if you can't afford to pay your GST, then don't pay it. And they're not going to be charging a lot of interest and penalties over this time. But if you file the tax return or GST return a month late because you didn't have the money, then you will get charged late filing penalties, which they probably wouldn't remit because there's not really any excuse not to file it on time. In terms of income tax, the government released some policy yesterday about losses being transferred backwards. So to be honest, it's not going to affect the 2020 tax year because everyone was trading normally for 11 and a half months, basically. So the 2020 tax return will probably be quite consistent with previous years. But what the losses going backwards means is that if you make a loss next year, so from April 2020 to March 2021, then you'll be able to transfer the loss backwards and get a refund of your income tax that you've paid for the March 2020 year. So I think it's a bit of a guessing game, really, about how much of a loss, and you need to have made a loss rather than just reduce profit. If you just make less profit, it's not going to really help you. In terms of paying prov tax, talk to your accountant because they'll be able to tell from your Xero, from your MYOB, and maybe even just from your GST returns, if your income is much reduced and how much prov tax you should be paying. So it might be that your provisional tax will be a lot less than what was estimated or what has been calculated. So I wouldn't go along and pay nothing, but talk to your tax agent and just see how much they think that you should be paying.
Great, thanks for that. Someone had made a comment saying, and this relates back to the person that was asking whether they can go for the unemployment as well as apply for the grants. This person here set up an application for the benefit at the same time as the subsidy, and they were recommended to withdraw the application for the benefit as they were receiving the subsidy. So it was just as you recommended.
Cool.
Jeni, sorry, I didn't discuss this with you before we did the seminar, but I think it might be good just to give some basic accounting advice on how people should set up their accounts if they're a sole trader or you're like a part-time musician, because I feel that is the thing that caused a lot of confusion when the government first announced these wage subsidies, that people potentially may have been didn't have, correct and clear accounting procedures around their music income. So what would your recommendation be to someone who is a sole trader working in the music industry about how they should set up their accounts separate to their personal accounts?
A really good place to start would be to have a separate bank account where all of your income, if you're doing gigs in the weekends, at bars or weddings or something like that, all of the income should go into that one bank account, and all of the expenses relating directly to your music. So it could be, I don't know, if you need a new microphone, if you need some more cables, even your telephone bills, things like that, should all be getting paid out of that bank account. And then pay yourself out of that as well. So just transfer a lump sum, say $500 a fortnight or however much surplus is left over, but don't use it as an everyday spending account. So the more transactions in there, the more complicated it will be. So that's probably quite a good place to start, and then you can identify quite clearly all of the income and all of the expenses relating to that income. So going on from that, the next step from that would be a basic spreadsheet, so an Excel or something like that. Just you're basically listing all of the income in one spreadsheet or one tab, and then in the other tab have your expenses listed. So that's a really basic cash book, pretty much, that you would be able to prepare your tax return for yourself if you were doing it yourself. Or if you had a tax agent, then all of the income and expenses are together, and it's really straightforward to do your tax return from there. If you were getting a bit more serious about it, then you might want to set up a cash book. So for example, like MYOB Essentials, or Xero. So Xero is probably a little bit expensive for a part-time situation, but if you're starting to do more and more, then Xero would help quite a lot, especially when it comes time to if you wanted to buy a new vehicle or something like that, then finance companies might want details of your income. So that's probably it's a good place to start if things are getting busier for you. And then if it's an easy way to see if you're getting close to the GST threshold as well. So you've got
Which
all of
is,
your listed one place.
and what's the GST threshold?
So if you earn $60,000 or more per year, then you should start registering for GST. If you're on the cusp of 60,000, maybe 61 one year and 58 the next year, I probably wouldn't rush into it because it adds a lot of compliance cost. But if you're consistently around 65 or $70,000 per year, then I think it's a good idea to register.
So with this separate bank account, which is just like a separate bank account to, it's connected to your personal bank account, what sort of expenses could people working in the music industry claim through that? Like, can it be petrol that they use to get to their gig? Can it be clothes that they have to buy to wear to the gig?
In terms of clothing and things like that, yes, definitely. If you were going to start claiming motor vehicle costs, there's actually a much more, you can claim petrol and things like that, but it's actually, if it's still, a part-time, if it's still part-time really, then it might be better just to claim mileage instead. So the IRD has mileage rates that you can claim per kilometre. So it might just be as easy and probably work out better financially just to claim mileage per year of, 1,000 kilometres per year or 2,000 kilometres per year. It's an easy calculation and it makes things a little bit, I think it's actually financially better for the taxpayer.
And for the part-timers that have started the separate bank account, can they claim home office expenses?
Yes, I think if you've got a garage and you're storing all your amps and all your drums and everything like that in there, then and you're not using it for your car or anything like that, because things do take over, then we can claim a portion of your home for, it's a rehearsal space, it's a storage space, it could even be a recording space. So yes, we can claim a portion of the house expenses. So that would be rent if you're renting, or if you own your home, then part of the interest on the mortgage, rates, insurance, everything like that.
And also, you can claim on research stuff, like Spotify, subscriptions, etc.
Yep. So Spotify, if you have Apple Music,
If
even
you buy
some.
vinyl,
What's that? Sorry.
if you buy vinyl.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Yeah, lots of little bits and pieces that you'd be quite surprised about. I think even if you have like storage or Google or anything like that you're paying a subscription for, then that's all business expenses, because maybe you wouldn't be paying that if you didn't have to, download all those things. So it's all legitimate business expenses.
I've got a question here. Our band is a tax partnership. Should we apply for the subsidy as a partnership or as individuals?
I think as individuals would be the best way, because partnerships don't pay tax. Everything flows through partnerships to the partners. So it's technically the partners that are working.
Great. And there's another question here. I'm a sole trader. When I applied for the subsidy, I had it put into my personal account as opposed to my separate account. Was this a mistake? And if so, can I just link that transaction back to the separate account in my spreadsheet?
That's fine. So The Ministry of Social Development, and I haven't been able to check because the IRD are upgrading their website, but I think that the wage subsidies will come through on your summary of earnings. So your accountant will see them and have access to it.
Okay, great. And then so end of the year financial statements for people that are doing their own and don't have an accountant to do it, what do you recommend that people should be doing around all these grants that they're receiving at the end of the year financial statements and tax returns?
So for individuals, are you talking about, or companies as well?
Yes, well, let's start with individuals, sole traders.
Okay. So for sole traders, then it's going to come through, if they got a wage subsidy, then it will come through on their summary of earnings. I'm 99% certain that they will. So therefore they will be included in your income. IRD will already know about it. So there's nothing really to do in terms of that. If you have a company, then it's a bit more complicated. But basically the income for the subsidy, if you just paid it to yourself as a shareholder, so a shareholder employee. So I'm actually not sure how IRD reporting that either, because I know when you apply for a company, you have to put in all of the employees' details. So you have to put in the employee's IRD number and date of birth, things like that. So perhaps IRD will be matching those records as well. But basically for a company, it is non-assessable income and then a non-deductible expense when it's paid as wages.
Okay, great. I've got another question here. Hi, can you please clarify what defines PT versus FT, e.g. if music is your only income source or the main source, and the number of gigs you have each week varies from week to week, how is the number of hours worked truly calculated?
I think it's not worth getting too stuck on 20 plus hours or 20 minus hours, because I think everyone that's a musician understands that you're not working only when you're doing gigs. So you're working when you're scribbling things down on pieces of paper. You're working when you are just playing with a guitar. So I don't think it's not strictly when you are out doing gigs that should be the number of hours that you're recording as income or working, because we all know that you're working when you're not working. It's not like you're stuck in an office from 8:30 till 5, so there's no measurement like that, but you are working probably when you don't realize.
Okay, great. Another question, what about musicians who make no taxable busking income? Can they apply for grants?
If you have been busking and not returning the income in a tax return, then the IRD probably would say that you haven't been working, you're not a taxpayer, so you haven't been paying tax on that income, so therefore probably not entitled to it.
Potentially might be able to apply for the MusicHelpsLive grant. Potentially.
I think so.
Yeah.
That's a possibility. Yeah.
Great. Well, that's all the questions from me today. Jenny, we'll just quickly see if there's any more questions from the audience.
Cool.
And there doesn't seem to be any more. So I want to say thank you very, very much for your time today. It's been truly enlightening. I've learned a lot myself. And I want to say thanks again to the NZ Music Commission, NZ On Air, Recorded Music New Zealand, AMCOS New Zealand and the MMF for making this seminar possible. And thanks to you, Jenny, again, for taking the time out to talk to everyone. For those of you who are MMF members, Jenny has put together a great sort of summary of what we've discussed today, so that will get sent out to you. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, Teresa.